Let's go.
You're listening to Making Data Simple, where we make the world of data effortless, relevant, and yes, even fun.
Folks, you've made your way back to Making Data Simple. I greatly appreciate it. This is Al Martin speaking. I'm a little under the weather today, I have to tell you, and I don't have my fancy mic, but the good news is I got somebody here that's going to carry me today, and that is Roger Premo. He's been on before. He's the general manager of corporate strategy and ventures. Now, Roger has been on a couple of the times. This is his third time because I did some checking. I think the last one, and I would encourage you to go back and listen to this one, is in July of 2023 and then August of 2022. So we've been having him come back frequently because it's always a fantastic discussion, as it will be today. But we're going to skip at least some of the introductions because you can always go back and you can listen to those two podcasts, which I promise will be worth it. And you can see how the times have already changed. With that, thank you, Roger, for being back again. We'll have some fun today. I've got several thoughts of questions, but we'll kind of wing it as we always do. Thank you. I appreciate you being here.
It is a pleasure, Al. And I'd say, despite your setup, you still got a great radio DJ voice and your technical acumen. So that'll carry the day for sure.
Well, now you've set me up. I'll see if I can live up to the standard. All right. Look, first question I have is, what have you been up to personally? You good? Everybody good? Family good?
Man, it has been busy. We're in strategy planning season for IBM, and I won't go into the details for the broad podcast, but there's a lot going on. So I'm a busy guy, enjoying it. We're just sneaking in. Summer's like kind of sneaking in, and got a decent Memorial Day in, so enjoying that. But our strategy planning process kind of culminates over the next month, so it's a little bit of a sprint, and then looking forward to a little bit of summertime after that to kind of recover.
So I thought strategy was like 24/7. Is this the fall plan prep? I mean, it seems like fall plan starts earlier. Pretty soon we're in spring plan. I don't know.
This is spring plan. This is the spring plan actually starts in winter, runs through the spring, and I think kind of concludes in summer. But it's spring plan is is the cycle.
All right, high level. I'm going to get into something that you were talking about, or I've heard you talk about, as the 10 truths of cloud and GenAI. However, before I do, overall, how's business been? What have you been up to on the business side?
Well, a lot, right? I think, and we'll get into it. I'd say, first of all, obviously, we're on this journey, right? And, with Arvind as our CEO, we've declared this hybrid cloud and AI strategy. And, we're on this evolution of continuing to see the proof points around that and continuing to evolve it in the right direction. And we've done a lot to exit parts of our portfolio that aren't in it. And I think the strategy continues to shape up in a positive direction, and it's driving the performance of the whole company. And, from my perspective, I feel like we're a more cohesive company than we've been in since I've interacted with IBM. And I think each year it's getting clearer. So I think good direction. I think one really fun one is, in the venture side of the business, we launched Enterprise AI Fund in Q4 last year. So we got a $500 million venture fund. For me personally, I just say that's been enormously fun to just spend more time with some of these early innovators that are driving this technology, and then looking at the ways that IBM and these early stage community can really complement one another. And I won't pick on names, but a lot of that early stage community is just super thrilled to work with IBM, and actually kind of picks us against versus some of our other technology peers when they look at who's the strategic investor they want to participate with. And so that whole process has been super gratifying. And I just say, as a PSA, anybody that's listening to the podcast that bumps into an interesting AI startup that, IBM Ventures should be talking to, just go to ibm.com/ventures, or just ping me directly. We're open for business, and we're thrilled about the strategic alignment and the downstream partnerships that it can create for us.
That's awesome. It's like you get to play Shark Tank.
We are playing Shark Tank, and it's really interesting now because obviously I think it's a best in class model to actually combine ventures with the strategy team, because the early stage community has a hypothesis on different strategies of how this AI market will unfold. And we can go at a much, lower level of investment, go test some of those hypotheses with these early stage communities. So it's just, it's a great learning engine for the strategy for the whole company. And then, I'm just super excited now. We're seeing more and more of them into commercial partnerships with IBM where we're better together in the field. So it's just it's been a cool journey, and we're barely into that $500 million fund. So there's a lot more companies, a lot more innovation to collaborate with.
I have had a couple people reach out to me, but let me ask one more question on that. So what are you looking for when you're looking to use the AI fund? Is it the idea itself? Is it the leader that has an idea, and whether they're extremely passionate and you say, hey, you can't lose with investing in this person? Or is it the financials? Is it the cash flow the plan that they present? I mean, what is it? What are you looking for?
So maybe I'll do it in two steps. One is like where we're looking, and then how we evaluate them, because I think you touched on both of them.
Yeah.
For us, we're looking at two broad areas, but one is kind of the middleware of AI. Getting AI from an experiment to really scaled production so it creates value in the enterprise. If it is how we do lifecycle around it, how we deploy it, how we govern it, how we secure it, all the capabilities that you need around an insight like that AI delivers. There's a bunch of companies that are creating capabilities around that space. And so we're looking at ones that are complementary to what we're doing with watsonx and help it, extend that kind of AI for business value proposition. The other place we're investing is in application companies that are building new categories or disrupting existing categories with AI. And we use this terminology of like AI thick and AI thin. AI thin, just to define it, we think generative AI will be part of the end user interactions for practically every application in the world. And, a bunch of companies will put Gen AI into how they have their user experience. But the thick ones are ones where fundamentally Gen AI changes the workflow. And so we think there's a number of spaces where new startups will be created that have an entirely new value proposition enabled by Gen AI. And so the ones that are kind of AI thick are the ones where we're placing investments. And I'd say even from that process, we're also learning a lot from how those businesses are performing, how they build their technical architectures to deliver Gen AI at scale. There's a lot of really interesting things coming from that innovator space. And I haven't done the latest count, but it'd be pretty safe to say there are thousands of companies chasing different categories of Gen AI enabled applications. So we're in a target rich environment, and we'd love to find both the ones that will be, strategically aligned to what IBM is doing, great financial investments, but also tee up, great commercial partnerships for, watsonx and the rest of our business. So it's a super exciting space.
Awesome. That's good to know. So I do want to jump in, and I thought where we'd start, we can start wherever you want to start, but I thought we'd start with the 10 truths of cloud and Gen AI that I've learned from you. Now, I do want to have a little fun with it, and I want to challenge you on some of those, or at least get more information as to why you see these as the 10 truths.
Yeah.
So I was going to have you go through those. I will set this up a little bit because I do listen. You carry a loud voice, and give the listeners a few statistics that you've taught me that kind of lend itself to these 10 truths, like Gen AI over the next 2 years. And I think this, some of this came from McKinsey or Boston Consulting Group, whatever. But it's like, we're going to see 70% productivity gains. 80% of orgs will be using Gen AI. 57%, I think, is multiple clouds. 79% say AI ethics is important. I don't know what the other 20% are doing then, but fair. And on cloud specifically, 94% of larger organizations will have workloads of some sort or another in cloud. One thing that really was interesting when I heard you present is that the 8-year return on investment for cloud is failing to achieve the target investments. Most likely it's over 100%, even up to 150% that organizations are targeting, and they're seeing -5 to 10%, not even close. And then 79, almost 80% apps run on private and public cloud. So it's kind of a setup. I mean, you had many more statistics.
Yeah.
And you're willing to jump in. Well, why don't you talk about your 10 and let's break them down a bit if you don't mind.
So I think, Al, you get into it. So maybe to start, what's my job leading strategy for IBM, right? And first is to make sure that we have a fact base that's an accurate mirror of what's going on in the market. What our customers need, what are technology trends, what are others in the market doing? And then that gives us the baseline information on, say, like, how do we evolve the strategy to better deliver value to our end clients in a differentiated way? And so what you started teeing up, we kind of bundled into the 10 truths, it makes it a catchy and engaging way to talk about it. But to your point, for each and every one of the quote truths, if it is the management consultants, if it's the Gartners and IDCs of the world, IBM Institute for Business Value, direct client interviews, each of those have multiple triangulation points from direct research or well-respected, credible sources that it makes them feel real. So that's part of this journalism that is like kind of the first part of my job, which is to just know the market we're in. And then the second part of my job is to help set strategy that addresses what we learned, the analyst that helps set strategy based on what the journalists learn. So the journalism is that facts, and we'll go through it quickly, but just for every one of them, just know behind each one of them is a body of work that me and in particular my team and a bunch of contributors across IBM have really dug into to substantiate it. Because if we're going to build strategy on a company at the scale of IBM, we want to do it with some real conviction around we're doing it to serve the market as we see it. From that, I'll jump in and we can start clicking through it. But 5 truths of generative AI, 5 truths of cloud, and then let's click into it. And you highlighted some of the facts already, but start with generative AI, right? It is the topic of the day. It's the topic of the year. It's remains red hot. And it starts with the basics that we don't, there's not a truth there. It's just an observation that is really occurring, which is the real value creation that's coming from generative AI. There's massive forecasts on trillions of dollars of value creation. And to your point, it's companies like McKinsey and BCG and Gartner that are forecasting these massive adoption. Almost every large company in the world has some form of generative AI pilot going on. There are forecasts of productivity depending on type of work that go from, incremental, the 10 or 20%, but some categories are 70, 80%. In some categories, the Gen AI will replace the job. And we need to think about how we evolve the skills and capabilities of our employee base to handle, deal with that and put them to the next best job. But it's a profound impact. And, I'm a student of technology history. I think, when I use the term disruptive technology, we don't use it lightly, but this is a disruptive technology. This is something that will create enormous advantage for incumbent companies that adopt it well to change their business. It will create new categories as well, as you're talking on the venture side. And I think if I look back on my career, it's, I think the internet and mobile representing putting computing in the pocket of billions of human beings and those are the only two that compare. And I think there are a bunch of other kind of technology inventions that we've seen come, but they haven't risen to that level. So I'd really say this is like really the only third time in my career I've seen something at this scale. And arguably this one may be the biggest, although, being bigger than the internet or being bigger than mobile is a high bar. Regardless, it's important. And then you dig into the truths, right? I think the first truth, which I think is relatively well understood now, is this notion of multi-model. And at early last year, right, the ChatGPT had come out. I spent time with other folks in the technology industry, some of our large West Coast peers, and they're building a giant model, and they really did say, "Hey, listen, we're building this giant model. There will just be one model. It's going to be ours, but that's okay. We'll price it fair, and you guys can use it." And really, if you look at the competition in this market, the energy in the open source community, and just the fundamentals of how clients buy technology, the truth has really gone to this multi-model world. There are so many different commercial vendors popping up with new generative AI models. For a second, talk about Mistral, who we announced a partnership with last week at our Think conference. Maybe shame on me, but I didn't know who Mistral was last year. And so there's a kind of a new leaders that keep popping up with the capabilities, these new capabilities, and the leaderboard of models keeps changing. So massive innovation. as well as this trend of academic and open source, where you're seeing a lot of new models being created, small models delivering exceptional results. But this commercial innovation, this open source innovation, paired with multiple modalities of models, paired with this pattern we're seeing in many clients where it's going from a large model to prove out that a use case of GenAI works, but then a shift to a different model or engineering multiple models together. If you look at a lot of the model orchestration companies, that's a big pattern as well. Al, you and I were just with an IT and procurement team yesterday, right? Thoughtful procurement teams are saying, listen, I'm not going to fall into the single threaded on a singular vendor. So they're insisting on multiple model for a pricing flexibility, risk controls, et cetera. So we're firmly in a multi-model world, and a lot of the client work, trend lines. I mean, if it's going any direction, it's more multi-model than less each time we look at it.
So number one being multi-model is the norm. And by the way, I have Mistral on my laptop, and I think it was like 4 gig or something. And yeah, so it's using CPUs because it's my laptop, and I haven't found anything that it won't answer as of yet. So pretty awesome. It's a much smaller model, et cetera. To your point of multi-model, probably smaller models will.
Hey, Al, wait, before you, so I've got it running on my laptop too, because I assume you did the same, but I've got the Instruct Lab command line. So I will say, I've also, since we last talked, I had to dust off my old command line skills. Anyway, that took a little bit of rust I had to get out of the brain, but that has been super fun to actually, if I'm on a plane anywhere, to just have a local
you got a local
model.
version.
And and I got a M2 Mac here, and it's pretty snappy on how it performs. And I got a couple of things where actually I was prepping for some talks in areas I wasn't as deep in, got the primer straight off the model locally. It was great.
I had to answer somebody on a plane one time. They lived near a elementary school, someplace near my home. And I said, give me the list of the top 10 elementary schools near Overland Park. It did great. And it was on a plane, and it's local. It's fantastic. But on the other side of this, I did get on stage, I have to tell you, and I was talking to a government. We had 400 people in the audience, and I was talking about multi-models, talked about being purpose-driven, talked about smaller models that are purpose-driven, that are better inferencing costs. And I won't tell you who, but there was one of the companies that got up after me and said, I disagree with Al. I think if one model can serve it all, if you could have one, why wouldn't you have one, as long as you can keep the cost down, and that one will solve all your problems? Why would you have a bunch of different models floating around?
And Al, I get it. That's why when I was talking about the journalism, all the facts I'm talking about are not the opinion. It is just the empirical truth. How is this emerging inside our clients? And so everybody will have an opinion in this market, and unsurprisingly, the opinions will tend to correspond to the strategies they're driving. They should, because you want to have something you believe in. But we're trying to slice through the opinion and really make it empirical. And just as an empirical statement, many of our clients began on a single model last year. The substantial majority of kind of the global 2000 from our survey work are now multi-model. In some shape or form. And if you draw a trend line through it, it just says it's moving more and more towards multi-model.
That one's easy for me, but I did have a counter. I mean, as you might expect.
Yeah,
particularly
for sure.
For those that don't have multiple models like we do, like with Granite. So let's go ahead and go to number 2. What's number 2?
Number 2 is that GenAI will be Hyman multi-cloud. My teams, we talked about our spring plan process, which is for the folks that aren't the IBMers in the audience. I mean, it's our strategy planning cycle. So, once a year we go through this process to look 5 years into the future and say, how do we shape our strategy? And in that process, we've been doing a lot of work on my team of actually interviewing companies, not that we're piloting, but the companies that have gotten Gen AI into production in the wild. And if you look at how they're doing it, they're selecting where they place that Gen AI in production based on where the applications and data and workflows that they already had for their business existed. So they're co-locating it in, if it's their data center, or if it's a public cloud vendor, they're co-locating that Gen AI in the place where the rest of the complementary applications exist. And so that's forcing it's for good logic, right? There's performance reasons. They're not moving data around the world. You want to do the inference off the data that's local. So that, because our clients had already been hybrid multi-cloud, they're bringing the Gen AI to their workloads rather than bringing their workloads to the Gen AI. And so as we've gone through the survey work, again, it's the substantial majority of companies that have gotten Gen AI to production for at least a handful of use cases. They end up being multi-cloud because they were multi-cloud before they started the Gen AI journey too.
What does hybrid really mean to you, though, or even multi-cloud? So if I'm on AWS and Azure, is that hybrid multi-cloud? We're good. Crosses, checks off the box. And do I always need OpenShift?
So I'd say a couple things. I'd say we've gotten into a world where the idea of IT as a department that lives on the side of the business is over. Our hypothesis, and we see it bearing out in a number of industries, the companies that transform themselves with technology will define winning and losing in different industries. And those businesses operate in many ways, in many places with many needs. So they need to adopt technology where it is the best business enabler. And that means different clouds, data centers, edge locations, inside a vehicle, inside a manufacturing shop floor, inside a restaurant, whatever it starts getting very industry specific when you get to the edge. And yeah, that to me is hybrid multi-cloud is the complex environment of where your technology happens to execute. And because of that necessity of business innovation with technology and the necessity to bring the tech to where the business is, you find our clients either voluntarily or involuntarily dragged into hybrid multi-cloud, which I think of just as heterogeneous locations of technology executing. And then we'll get to it a little bit in the hybrid cloud section. But yeah, one of the things we've seen in generation of technology after generation of technology is that platforms create value. And so if you say, I exist in this complex environment, and I say, I'm not going to have a platform, I'm going to build bespoke technology stacks in all those environments, that is inconsistent with the rules of what platforms have taught us before. And so in our case, for this generation, we really strongly believe that, first of all, open source is a core component of how you build that. Open source has been this gift that has a level. Now it's got Google open source Kubernetes 10 years ago. 10-year anniversary is coming this year. And the open source community has rallied around that. So now it's an application platform that can really span those different environments. So you can, where it wasn't technically feasible, maybe not that long ago, now it is technically feasible to build a platform across that heterogeneity. And then you start to get the platform economics that we've seen in so many prior generations of technology. And it could be OpenShift. It could be there are some other competitors out there that offer a similar value proposition. But before you even get to is it from IBM or Red Hat or somebody else, the advice I give to business leaders and CTOs is you got to think about platforms. And obviously with trends towards platform engineering and something, this isn't new news to many of these organizations, but yeah, it's build platforms so the heterogeneity is not a friction on your business. We're opinionated. We think OpenShift is the best place to do that. And it's why we acquired Red Hat. It's having that, we had that opinion before we were the vendor that delivered that opinion.
Fair enough. All right. So we got the two. What's the third one?
The third one is that governance and security are must-have requirements for enterprise adoption of Gen AI. And I think this one, again, when we look at the survey work, I think there has been what's really happened in the market. Al, just a sidebar. You know this, but IBM's had real leadership on AI ethics and AI governance for nearly a decade now, going back to the original Watson. And that was driven by our experiences of being one of the early vendors to help our clients deploy AI in their business. And they ran into these ethics and governance and regulatory concerns early in that. And we recognize that helping our clients both have a code of ethics for how they do AI and have the tools that help enforce and operate and observe those ethics in practice is critical. The thing that's happened though with generative AI is we've made the governance challenge so visceral with hallucinations. And back to your question, your point on different school districts or whatever that you can look up on a generative AI model. If you just play the game of how many questions can you ask that the truthful answer to, and how long will it be before you see the hallucination sneak into it? It happens pretty quick, and anyway, I won't talk about the IBM leader, but it's an IBM leader around, and they put their name into one of these GenAI, one of our partners' GenAI models, and came back with a fictional answer to like what their job and background was. So we see them; they're real. They're happening out there in the wild for all of us to see, and we see the things that hit the front page of the paper as a result. So AI ethics became very visceral, well understood, and everybody. It was not just a technical concept, or the AI ethics team is beating the drums and telling it to the C-suite. The C-suite cares about it because they see it in practice and they see the implications of people who got it wrong. And so it is a big obstacle that, most or all companies that really put this powerful technology to work are going to have to surface if they're going to truly change their business with generative AI.
I get the requirement. And by the way, as that aside, when I was looking up those school districts, I did ask the question a few times because it was making up some answers until I got the right one. So fair enough. It is a problem. But I know that the listeners, as they listen to this requirement, governance and security are key requirements, their shoulders probably shrug, because doesn't that slow things down? Doesn't it get complex then? Doesn't it be like, oh, now we're talking some real work to get this implemented?
Well, two thoughts there. I mean, it's the reality of the business. I just think you can't take on risks that the business can't handle. And I love this quote. We had on stage at Think from one of our partners that was there. They said, we drive faster now because we have seatbelts. The governance does not hold you back. It's actually knowing that the governance is in place means that you can innovate at pace. And yes, there needs to be some work done now to establish the governance standards and put the practices in place that can make sure that it occurs. But over the long run, we're of the firm belief that actually that seatbelts metaphor is true. Those that do this well will be the ones that actually are more effective at deploying into their business, because if it's customers, if it's regulators, if it's shareholders that don't want undue risk in the business, the stakeholders that your business serves will not put up with will just simply not accept a world in which we take on more AI risk than benefit.
That's a good answer. I'm going to steal that one from you.
Yeah, I love that. It's I'm going to forget the name from Casper Labs who was on stage at Think last week, but I love that one. Hey, truth 4 is that data matters for long-term competitive advantage. And again, our clients are even, we have survey work from the IBM Institute for Business Value that, they do a CEO survey with 3,000 survey CEOs every year. Even CEOs, who typically don't dig at, CEOs are clearly getting more technical than they used to be, but 60% of them are putting a priority on data quality, data lineage, data understanding, because they see the value that's coming from AI and they know they need to get ready from it. So it's becoming a priority, again, even in the C-suite. And it's a really simple metaphor. I mean, to create competitive advantage, if we can just do it if we can go to GPT-4 and get an answer back from GPT-4 without our data involved, the barrier for our competition to do that is minimal as well. So it's impossible to create competitive advantage off what's already just the data that's in the model. The companies that can kind of combine the power of a generative AI model with their unique data, their unique workflows, their unique insights, that's where business transformation and long-term value comes from. And I talked to one of the AI leaders at Gartner, and I asked her what are the success criteria that they're seeing in the market on this in generative AI, those that got generative AI to production with some business success. And her answer was, data quality was the number one factor. They had their they'd actually begun their data quality journeys before the Gen AI craze, but because they'd done that, they were in a faster, better path to derive value from it.
Look, this is probably my favorite one because I'm a data guy, right? That's why we're here, making data simple. But I got an odd question for you. As long as I have quality data, does an organization still have to organize, catalog, structured, unstructured data? Can't I just ingest that into a neural network and be done with it and keep my system of record separate? So then I save a lot of steps.
I mean, it's a great conversation. We could probably do a whole session on it. And as you know, our head of research, Dario, does a great, he talked about this at Think next week. I do believe that the foundation model will become a new data repository for the enterprise. We'll still need operational databases. We'll still need analytical databases, but you'll find that there's a new interaction in the enterprise that is a conversation to get data that happens directly with the GenAI model. And Dario's point on this, which I think is brilliant, is that if you look at back to your school district's query, the GenAI model practically has, the large GenAI models have like 100% of the internet on them. All the ones in which there's not some use restriction that prevents it, that's all going in there. And maybe in some of our friends, they're actually, even the stuff with usage restrictions is in there. So 100% of the internet data is in the large language models now. It is sub 1% of enterprise data is in their custom foundation models. So that journey to get more and more of the enterprise data embedded into the model so you can have that conversational interaction with the data, we think that will be a big deal, and it will be part of the journey every company is on. And we think that we'll get to it some techniques that make that are the best fit way to accomplish that, or at least the best fit way that we've invented so far. And we will watch this red hat market. Does that mean that Al, I think it will allow some places where you get a faster answer to the data without, you don't have to put everything through the same rigor of a data quality journey. But if the data is incorrect or if it's absent and I need the answer to the question, the GenAI model will not imagine the answer for a unique blank cell about something about a customer. Similarly, there's a lot of data in the enterprise that we still need to, if it's privileged data, private data, health data, we still have to think about data access and controls, because if the GenAI model is a way to accidentally let privileged information sneak out to people that can't see it, that's an unacceptable answer too. So I think there's a lot of modern data quality that does get some of the data access gets easier in a generative AI world, but I think a lot of the data quality, data governance, data access, data security remains, and maybe even more so, because if we've got the whole company or all my customers touching this thing, man, we've never before had a pipe that was connected that could allow all those constituencies to potentially see that data.
Good answer. All right, I think you killed number 4.
Truth number 5 is that scaling for value and ROI is still challenging. And so this is one that, I think the data is really interesting, looking at use cases of enterprise adoption of GenAI. And I like to cite a study done by Boston Consulting Group where they gave their consultants generative AI tools, effectively kind of an internal chat GPT for consultants to drive their work. And what they found was a range of positive to negative productivity. Some of the teams adopted it and they got a plus 40% productivity. That's pretty enormous in an organization of that scale. And then, but some of the consultants got a negative 20+% loss of productivity. And what's really interesting about the people that lost productivity is they still self-reported, I'm more productive, but the actual output measures disagreed with their self-assessment. So it's lots of feedback on that for so many pilots occurring across different enterprises and use cases. There's a range of outcomes from what these pilots have delivered. If that's the value side of the ROI equation, then you've also got the cost side of this. And we kind of referenced it earlier, but some of these models, if they're enormous in terms of how big a file they are, the computational resources necessary it was to train it, but now to do the inference on it, they can be expensive. And so we've done work in the IBM team looking at a typical customer service use case and looking at a large model versus the cost of inference of a large model versus a smaller open source model that was purpose tuned for that job. And both of them delivered equivalent output in that customer service use case, but there's a 25x difference in the inference cost. So think of that ROI equation, and so many companies are trying to figure out how I create value with this. If you got a range of positive to negative, that was a 60-point spread of value on the returns that one BCG study had. But there are a lot of other stories like that out there. And you've got a 25x difference in the denominator of your ROI equation on the cost of inference. I mean, it's still something where there's a lot of uncertainty about what places will create value. Now, we don't advocate, hey, everything has to go to the ROI cops to spin it up. But I think there is something about facilitating the right balance of experimentation. But then as things scale, really understanding, where does this create value? And it's still a challenging process in most large companies around the world.
Look, I think I'm going to leave that one at that. So you got through 5. Let me repeat the 5 as I heard them. Multi-model is now the norm. Multi-cloud and hybrid cloud deployments are expected. Governance and security are key requirements. That was number 3. Number 4, data matters for long-term value. And number 5, scaling for value is essentially challenging. Although I was going to ask you, so how do we solve that? How do you scale AI for value?
When I talk to clients and advise them, I'd say a few things. I think one is you do want to facilitate some experimentation, right? And we've done that in IBM at scale. We had the Watson X challenge. So we asked our businesses to say, like, how could you create value? So for the Watson X challenge, that people don't know, it was taking our own GenAI and asking basically the entire company to do GenAI use cases to prove it out. And from that experimentation, we figured out which ones are scaled, and now some of them are being deployed across the entire company. So there's a balance of experimentation, but when you get to that scale point, you do have to look at what is the ROI equation that you want to quantify this from, and it's from traditional and sometimes new measures of business value, and that's also looking at the right fit of the technical architecture that delivers it. And my favorite quote comes from a client on this, where they did it in a customer service use case, and they just simply said, I don't need to pay the price of inference to do my customer support in the tone of Shakespeare. There was much more in the model that they needed for the use case. And so you've got to go through that process. And then, the other piece of advice is, and sometimes, Al, we saw, there's some people they do want to jump to more transformative use cases. But if you look at, again, I'm a student of history, if you look at the history of these, they typically go from an efficiency phase to an effectiveness phase to a transformation phase. And so we're kind of in the efficiency. A lot of these are efficiency use cases, but they're super valuable. If you look at what IBM's done across its business with digital labor automation and our HR and our IT and our procurement, we're talking externally about, it's in our financial reports. It's hundreds of millions of dollars of productivity that we're gaining from it. So that efficiency wave isn't a boring thing. It's a necessary thing to create the investment appetite for the next wave. And along the way, it builds the skills in our technology and business teams to just get fluent in generative AI. Of course, there's a ton of industries in which you get to effectiveness faster. We're seeing so much in the marketing and creative space where, a creative can create, a dozen different works of art in a matter of minutes that would have taken a much longer leveraging the generative AI technology. So we are seeing categories where the effectiveness use cases are coming. And then there will be this, since back to this being a disruptive technology, this will create new businesses in the world. And in the venture space, we're seeing a number of startups which are candidates to create new categories. I think the education space will be disrupted and transformed by this technology. But get started on the things where there's clear dollars at the bottom line to help build up to the things that are kind of more fundamental changes to the business.
Let's save the last 5, unless you object to it, for a follow-on, if that's okay. So we'll do the first 5 here. So, because I got a couple follow-on questions. You talked about getting started with AI. What's your advice? So you've given the 5 truths. And I happen to agree with all the truths. Maybe you're preaching to the choir, but I do agree. How do you get started in AI? What is your prescription and or your advice?
A couple things. I do believe this is a transformative technology. So you can't be on the sidelines. So it is getting started, and it is taking technology teams and building skills to understand and adopt this technology. I think classic digital transformation, it needs to be the cross-functional team. The data science team will not imagine the future of your business standalone. It needs to be paired with kind of the high potential leaders from the business and functions that can help collaborate in the imagination of what's next. And then to the point we were just on to this efficiency, then effectiveness, then transformation phases of disruptive technologies. Getting started on things where we've seen so much in customer service, we've seen so much in code, we've seen so much in digital process automation. Get started in the places where there are proven patterns of value, allow some experimentations on some new ones, but just because everybody else is getting value from one of these known use cases, I wouldn't shy away from it. That helps build the flywheel of skills and experience that helps scale to the next thing. That's my getting started guide. And it is, I will say, it's just the kind of the guardrails I've seen. The experiments go wild, that you have so many experiments without a team that oversees them that it just they're too small and they kind of crush under their own weight. I've also seen the other extreme, which is like too much planning and too much financial detail, for instance, that you just never get anything going. There's a medium point of you need to be in this balance of experimentation and practicality that I think is being necessary for those that kind of innovate with this tech, but also in the long run create real business value from it.
I'm going to ask you a question that was asked by the client we did visit yesterday. At dinner, they asked me this question. I want to see how you would answer it. They essentially said, what's IBM's number one differentiator here? Or if you have a mantra, what would the mantra be?
Our mantra is we are AI for business. And if it's everything, if you get into, they unpack what does that mean? I think it is, first of all, it is open source AI enabled by the models we've open sourced, the InstructLab technique, which I think is groundbreaking and will change the industry and how open source contributor. We're gonna have. We hope and intend this is much like a Linux, where you have hundreds of thousands or millions of contributors advancing that open source model and this novel kind of technique to bring the community into innovation. So it'll be the best model, but built in a transparent and open way, paired with a portfolio that is enterprise grade in delivering a lot of the things that we were getting to around what is really necessary to scale this. Well governed, well secured, data well integrated and governed as well. So it is a kind of the best innovation model enabled by open source, paired with enterprise grade execution of this that helps ladder up to that AI for business. And you talk about the total IBM portfolio. Sorry, I neglecting it if I didn't talk about IBM Consulting. Also a team of experts that can help you on your journey. So if you don't, to that getting started guide we talked about earlier, if you look around your team and say, I don't have the generative AI gurus that can help scale this up, bring in IBM Consulting to get some of those folks embedded into the business to help start that flywheel going. So we are AI for business. And I think that lives distinctly versus, AI for consumer, AI for a social network.
This is the way I answered it. I said, look, I think the future of AI is open. That's what we're betting on. We're betting on that open ecosystem. In fact, we've got a relationship with Meta and AI Reliance, and there's been something like over $110 billion spent on AI as a result. But I said, if you want a mantra, it'd be trusted and open AI for the enterprise. I really want to key on that trusted piece because unlike many of the other players in the market, I don't think that they can put the trusted moniker in that mantra. I just don't think they can. You agree?
Al, I completely agree. And I just, without picking on particular competitors, I'm amazed by how much things, trust issues can hit the front pages so frequently. But is sometimes it's still not sneaking through to drive in some of the decision making on this. So I do think we got to play the long game on trust, and that's been part of what IBM has done throughout its entire history. I think it's interesting how much some of these what I would think of as real fundamental issues get brushed off. So I think it'll be interesting to watch.
I'm actually shocked. The clients I talk to are just using a lot of these models. They don't know where the data came from or otherwise, and they're just like, yeah, well, we're using it. I don't know if we've really stepped back to think, what the legalities are. I think it's going to come to pass that we're going to have the right strategy there, removing hate, removing profanity, removing copyrights. That's going to get people in trouble in the long run. I'm not sure I fully understand how people are just going forward. I guess they just all figure, hey, it'll wash out in the end. We'll figure it out then.
I think it can be something that's like an industry problem, not my problem, is probably it will be figured out at large, and it may force me to change downstream. Anyway, it'll be interesting to watch. I think it's fascinating.
Let me ask you a question that I've brought back that I love. It's a more difficult question, but always gives some great insight. You can pass if you want, but it's what is true, but no one agrees with you on.
When we look in 10 years, it will be true that we'll look at what we're doing now at IBM. If you think of open source as a platform with Red Hat, if you think about open AI innovation, if you think about betting on trust for the long run as opposed to kind of cutting corners, I think we'll look back in 10 years and see IBM at the absolute lead of our industry and look back and say, it was all obvious in hindsight. And I feel like it's a little bit, if you read the NVIDIA story, they were getting beat up 10 years ago. They had investors saying, why are you investing in this AI stuff? You got to focus on your gaming cards. It takes a lot of courage and conviction to really stick to it. But I think what we're sticking to is going to take us to a clear leadership. And the same way very few people are, saying, oh, I was wrong about NVIDIA. I think there'll be a lot of revisionist history from folks that say, oh, I saw it the whole time, because it will feel obvious in hindsight.
I believe that you're right. Hey, I want to be conscious of time, Roger, so I want to appreciate you being here. We will do the next 5 when I get you on next, and that'll talk to your truths for cloud. Same place folks can reach you?
For folks, non-IBMers, LinkedIn's a great spot. So just check out Roger Premo on LinkedIn. I try to respond to everything I get, with the there's some strange headhunter emails that are I ignore, but and then for folks inside IBM, Roger_that is my Slack channel. It's our open conversation about the IBM strategy and how we all collectively use this brilliant company to help evolve and iterate and learn from one another. So wide open for feedback and conversation in both channels.
You're the best, man. Hey, is there anything that you're learning today before I close up? Anything you're learning, any books you're reading that folks should be mindful of?
Yeah, well, I got 2 things. So I am working on my laptop. I'm building my own InstructLab skills. So I'm making myself an InstructLab practitioner. I've got like I said, I was dusting off my development skills. I got my VS Code open here, and I'm making my Q&A YAML file. And then books. I'll say I'm in the second book of the 3-body problem. I'm holding off on watching that one on TV. The first book I thought was great. It was wild. And then what I'm told is that the second book is even crazier. So I'm looking forward to when I get some free time, really ripping into that.
So thank you for listening. As always, hit us on almartintalksdata@gmail.com. Love to hear from you. We listen and we get the guests on that you request. So thank you again. Until next time, we will see you on the podcast. Bye-bye.